Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Dial the Gate, episode 280. My name is David Reed. We have part four of our ongoing interview with Stargate producer and director Martin Wood. I am always thrilled to have this guest on because he has a wealth of information. Martin, thank you for being with me, sir. Where is it you are again? I wanted to make sure I got this on the record.
Halifax, Nova Scotia.
And you are filming which series
It's
out there?
this series called Sullivan's Crossing. It's a CW
Okay.
series.
Okay. And how long are you out there working on this show?
8 weeks.
Oh,
I
okay.
found out last week I was coming out. I was in the middle of doing another series and I was just in my last 3 days and I got a call from my agent saying, "Can you parachute into Halifax?" And I said, "Sure." For how long? And he goes, "The next 2 months." And I went, "Sure. Okay."
So much
So
for lives with kids, or I mean, there's
they
only
just went
so
to
much you
school.
can.
So they're
Okay,
actually
they're not at
closer
home
to me
anymore.
here. They're closer to me here than they
Oh,
were because they're in Ontario. So it's closer to me here. It's a 2 hour flight from here rather than a 4 hour flight from Vancouver. So
well, that works. There you
yeah.
go. Before we started, you and I were talking about the content and pacing of a lot of different shows. One of the things that you that we kind of mentioned was the velocity of this kind of show and Virgin River and some of the others versus like sci-fi programming, which is there's usually a MacGuffin.
Yeah.
The plot elements. We must hit these. We have to be higher concept. But with these kinds of shows, you get to explore character a little bit more. Whereas in
Well,
in
that's
shows like Atlantis and SG1, they were
yeah.
kind of fleeting.
The interesting thing to me is that for years and years, I was pigeonholed as a sci-fi director. I could only do sci-fi. I could only do sci-fi. And then along comes this obscure series that was one of Hallmark's very first series. And a friend of mine was producing it, and he said, "I need you to come in and do an episode of this." And he had to convince Hallmark that I could do it because Hallmark's like, "Wait a sec, this guy does action and sci-fi and that kind of stuff." And so I went in and did 2 episodes, and they just kept calling me back. And then over the course of about 5 years, my whole world changed into
Huh?
not doing action, but doing romantic drama and rom-com and things like this. And I thought, do I enjoy this? Or do I, and I was enjoying myself, but I didn't understand why I was enjoying it. And what I was telling you was that one of the things that happens in sci-fi is that it tends to be action driven, tends to be situationally driven, and it's not human interaction driven necessarily. It's a team that has to do something, and it's the situation that we have to deal with. And weekly, it's a different monster of the week with Sanctuary, or it's a different thing. And of course, you have interactions, you have human interaction with that, but they tend to be a little bit more. Um, uh, uh, the cutout is a little bit more defined around characters in sci-fi. And it's mostly because they're function-based characters.
Mm-hmm.
They do have relationships. They do have all this kind of stuff. They do everything that every other character does, but it's not the relationship that necessarily drives the series.
They're part of
Where,
an allegory.
yeah, very much.
Yeah.
And long arcs that drive relationship and long things that drive this. Whereas with this kind of thing, like Virgin River and with Sullivan's Crossing and with a bunch of things I'm doing now, these are these are about two people sitting at a table having a really difficult conversation about an emotional thing. And as much as I find, and this doesn't change. Last week I was on the Pacific Ocean. This week I'm on the Atlantic Ocean,
Oh
and
God.
the requirements of that. Yeah, believe me, I left one series that I'd shot. I shot it on. I started shooting at 7 o'clock in the morning, ended at 8 o'clock at night. Got on a plane, flew overnight, and started prepping this on the Tuesday. So I was
Count your
taking
blessings.
yeah. Um, but what happens is that in all of these scripts, they're all very similar in that you get into the minds of the characters, and especially with this series, because I hadn't seen this series before, so I watched 20 hours of this series over the course of a week to see what the situation was with them. And the situation is very it's nuanced inside the characters. And as a director, the I think I told you the story about what I used to do with, on episode number 40 for me or whatever of Stargate. One of the first things that I did was I started looking at it and see how many boardroom scenes I had to do. So I had to think of something new to do in the boardroom,
Yeah.
a new way to get in there, a new way to, cut the table in half. I've told
Yeah.
you those stories.
Yep.
Here, it's this situation is going to happen with these characters, and with Virgin River, I've done like 25 of them, and I'm not bored with it yet because the emotional situation that happens between the two characters changes. And so what it draws out of a director is it draws the dramatic urge to sit there and fine tune a performance. So it's still exciting to me to go into production and go in every day. And what's funny is I go into a series, like I just finished doing a series that I'd done 15 episodes of before, but the crew goes, "It's so great to watch how you shoot this because you don't shoot it like a lot of the other directors."
No, you have your
And
fingerprints on it.
I take in a little bit of what I learned in terms of shooting action and shooting, the momentum of a scene can be changed by what you do with the camera and what you do with the actors. And so I appreciate the fact that I can do a hybrid between the two genres, um, in the way that I actually direct them.
I would imagine that despite the difference in genres, your toolkit, your toolbox is only expanding, from one to the other because correct me if I'm wrong, but I would think that your prep time would be less because it's far less technical. Or am I wrong about that? Is it the same?
You would think that, but it is the same amount.
Really?
And I
Not
use
blowing up
every second.
pyramids in full
No,
circle? No.
I use every second of it. The
Yeah.
the interesting thing is the delivery time is different
Oh, that makes
because
sense.
you still have to prep and shoot in this, in this 3 week period, and then you have to shoot in this 3 week period. But what happens afterwards with it is this gets cut, music gets applied, color corrected, it can go on the air. And that doesn't happen when you've got visual effects or special effects and that kind of stuff. Then you've got that 27-week delivery period and whatever. So there's a difference at the back end of it, but the front end for journeyman directors and things like that, and writers too, it's very short. It's the same amount of time for both of them. Um, and your brain does a different type of process. I mean, I do a shot list. If you ever saw the 200th episode book, you saw the example of the shot list I do, which are always this insane thing that I put together, and I do it on every show I've ever done. There's an entire Bible for the entire show before I start the show, and it has written down what I need to do in every scene. My process doesn't change no matter what I'm directing. If I'm doing there is an extra step if I'm doing action because I'll do a storyboard with it sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
or I'll do previs with it, or I'll do some of that kind of stuff. So there is and that's just a tool to tell everybody else what's in my brain. So that doesn't have to happen when you're going to have 5 people in a room, and there's not much to previs or anything like that. That process is a little different for me, but the idea of doing action when I have to explain it to a bunch of people, then they're going to see, storyboards. They're going to see concept art. They're going to see, that kind of stuff has to come out. I couldn't do Sanctuary without being able to do that, especially because it was actors walking onto a green screen.
Yeah, there's nothing
They
there.
go, what is happening here?
Right. Jeez. Well, and it's interesting that we're kind of going in that direction because one of the things that I've looked back on the 3 that I've done with you for Dial the Gate, and one of the things that I find a gaping hole in my content that you could drive a semi through is we haven't talked a great deal about some of the bigger set pieces of the franchise. And one of the ones that I recently talked with, I think it was Craig Vandenbigler about, was blowing the pyramid in full circle.
Yeah.
And the episode Full Circle. What a huge show that
That was
was.
pretty epic. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you remember about Full Circle and working on that shrinking plot of sand
Yeah.
out by the airport?
Yes. There were so many different elements to Full Circle. The biggest thing I remember is Rick in the chair. Um, and I think that's the episode where he's
That's Lost City.
Lost City. Sorry.
Yeah, no, this is a year before. We have to go to Abydos to save them
Right.
from Anubis, who's about to blow the pyramid out of the sky. And we have
Right.
Michael Shanks back for this episode. That was a big deal. Thomasina Gibson,
Yes.
the author, was on the set for a scene. There's a lot of little
Right.
things running through this.
Um, God, I have to remember Full Circle then because I was remembering Lost City. Um,
You blew up the Abydos pyramid in that,
I
which
do
is
remember that.
probably one of the most. I love that sequence because it's bittersweet in that we're losing, a cornerstone of the franchise.
Been there
And
from the movie. Yeah.
right. How long does it take to get something like that ready to go? Obviously, you have practical explosives on set, and then it's going to be enhanced with digital effects later, particularly the sand, sweetening that up. How does that go?
Um,
No pressure, Martin. It's only been 30 years.
no, honestly, I just want to look
Yeah.
at the sequence. Um,
The fact that you can do that is that's just wild.
yeah, yeah. Um,
Take your time.
Sorry,
No,
this is not
please
good
take your time.
podcasting if I do this. Um, oh, it goes to Exploding Star. Um,
You want to let's see here. Pull this up here. No, that's just the. Isn't it amazing when we can have something ready to go and then we're
yes.
looking for a specific scene? There's a beam that comes down out of the sky with Anubis's mothership, and then it stops, and you guys loaded explosive charges underneath this model of the pyramid, which had to have been, 10 feet square.
It was, and yeah, I really want to see the sequence because I can actually describe to you the entire sequence of it. Um,
I would pull it for you, but then I would get a copyright. I would
yes.
show it to
Yeah.
you live.
Okay, here it is.
I won't do this to you next time, my friend. I'll have
No, no,
these ready to go beforehand.
it's totally fine too because I can I don't want to waste podcast time
No,
on
you're
this.
fine.
Okay, here it is. So let's see if I can find the actual sequence.
Yeah, it's about 8 minutes before the end of the episode.
Right. Um, uh, One of the things that came up with this. Okay, there it is. I'm just watching it now. The interesting thing was that was the Cheops class pyramid ship, right? That we brought in.
This one was the Anubis's mothership is kind of like a flower. It
yeah.
unlocks and unfolds
Yeah.
because he's just acquired the last of these crystal eyes, one of which I have actually right here.
Yeah, that's the Cheops
From Full
class,
Circle.
right?
He gets this. He manages to get this from SG-1 and tricks Daniel into to getting that. And then he kills all the Abydonians except Oma takes them. And
Right.
this ascends the entire culture.
I love remembering this.
It was a good show you guys did.
Yeah. Oh, it was, I mean, it was fantastic. Um, it's funny because I just watched part of Continuum the other day. I was thinking about a sequence that I had shot in it and wanted to remember myself. Um, or
Which
remember
sequence was that?
for myself. The flying sequence, where we're all on the planes and Brad Wright is one of the pilots. Um, and I had thought I had done one thing with it, and then I looked at it again and realized I had changed sort of midstream with it to because I was towing the planes in a circle.
Yeah.
Um, and I had done that once before, and it had worked really well. This time, because, and I may have told you this before, but as we're flying into it, as each time we do the circle, there's outtakes uh, of somebody's line starting, and then I go sign, and this big Exxon sign would come up in behind them because I had to pull them past the hangar. And then we'd wait until and I go sign off, and then they'd start the line again. And so as we're dragging around in this giant circle, there's this there's this indication of sort of everybody wanting to get their lines done before the sign came in because they knew that there'd be this brief pause when that happened. And one of the other things I was doing was I had a smoke tube at the front of the plane to blow smoke past, so it actually looked like there were clouds that we were going through, which doesn't actually happen when you're flying. You don't see that, but because you've got a camera outside, it does that. I did it again for a movie that I did for Netflix called Operation Christmas Drop, and
Good
I
film.
couldn't. I had Alexander Ludwig as the pilot.
Yep.
I could put my own co-pilot in. I could put the other actors in the plane and have them doing everything except the pilot seat. And so I had to make it look like Alexander was flying this. So again, we're dragging this giant transport craft around, and I've got a camera on him, and I've got him framed against the sky. So every time you cut back and forth to him, it was the same process I used in Continuum for that. Um, but anyway, back to the pyramid blow up. Anytime that we did a big explosion, one of the things that we had to do with it, one of the things that a lot of people don't know is that there was a lot of sand in the base of it because in order to get that sand to interact, I had to put sand inside in a couple of layers inside that, which literally made it that much more dangerous for everybody when we were blowing it up. And the thing that happens for me with miniatures a lot of times is a miniature blow up tends to, because you use det cord to blow it up, you tend to fragment it so much that it starts to look like wood splinters. And what we did on the side of the pyramid was there are actual panels that were put on the pyramid that were not supposed to explode, that would blow off of it, but would not be splintered.
So it's like the rock has just been propelled off, like it's
And
giant stones.
that was a big part for both Visifex and for me is to make a miniature not look like it was made out of wood.
Right, because it's
You know,
stones.
and you can't make it out of metal, you can't make it out of rock.
Yeah.
So it was putting panels on that were small enough that would be propelled, but would not. And again, everything that you put on it becomes a projectile. Everything you put in it becomes a projectile. And so you move further and further away from it behind protection. Um, there was another one that we blew up that we used so much det cord in. It was crazy. And I'm trying to remember what episode it was. It was one that we had John, was it the gatekeeper one? Um,
More information.
it was Q,
Yeah, John
uh,
Delancey.
John Delancey. Um,
When he blew up, well, he blew out of the Prometheus in
yes.
Prometheus,
Yep. Yep.
but that wasn't really an explosion.
No, it wasn't. I'm sorry. I'm mixing John up with another one of our. If I can remember the guy's name, you'll be able to tell me what
Yeah.
it was. let me see. It's funny because I just used him. He's in Virgin River. I just used him. He's Jack's father in Virgin River.
Keith
Keith McKechnie? No, it's
McKechnie, who plays Nick.
no, that's Nick.
That's
It's
Jack's father. Jack Sheridan.
he plays Jack. Jack Sheridan is Martin Henderson's name. I'm just looking for a full cast here. Oh, this is so funny. I'm just wasting your time with it.
No, it's okay. It's okay. You're usually like spitting them out, so I don't think
Yeah.
I'm not going to give him an episode this beforehand. He knows it all. So
There's things that come up that I sit there going, oh,
it
that's
may come
hilarious.
back to you when we
Yeah.
move around a little bit.
I'm going to show you his picture, and you tell me.
Okay.
There's his picture.
On the left,
He's on the left. He was. We blew him up
you blew
in a
him
tower.
up.
He was in a tower. Oh
Blew up in a
man,
tower. What's the actor's name?
that's what I'm just
Yeah.
looking.
Fandom? Are we guys seeing this? Did you guys recognize him? I didn't recognize him. It's been too long, and I'm usually pretty good
Yeah.
at that.
Yeah. Hold on for
Let's
just a second. Tom Butler.
Tom Butler.
Tom Butler.
So,
Yeah.
I believe that would be Into the Fire, because he was Hathor's Jaffa,
Right.
and yes, so there was a lot of that in
There
that.
was a massive tower explosion that he was in.
Okay, he was
one.
on. I believe he was on the ground as one of the Jaffa, but
Yes.
one of the commanding Jaffa. But there was a Jaffa in the tower. These things that came out of the ground and
Yeah.
had the turrets in them. So when Teal'c and Hammond came by in the needle threader,
Right.
they blew that thing away. That was a big explosion.
We used too much det cord in that. And I remember Ray Douglas saying to me, we should probably move back. And this was made out of wood. And we're like, okay. And I said, are the cameras okay? And he goes, unmanned, they're okay. And I'm like, unmanned, they're okay. Okay, so we lock them off, we put protection in front of them, and we move back. And he goes, I think we should get behind the trucks. And they had their special effects trailers there. And we got behind, he goes, behind the wheels of the trucks. So, and I'm like, okay. And then it was this massive explosion blew this thing up. And I remember looking at the footage going, you can't see the thing blowing up. We had to augment that because it happened so fast. Dead cord detonates so quickly. And it's not like gas bombs. Gas bombs we use to actually have the big, things go up in the air. This was just blow it apart, and it atomized it. It was so and so that was the kind of thing that we'd think about when you're blowing up something that you want to see explode into these pieces, you know.
I would think as a layman, bigger is better. But I guess if you blow away the detail, you're
That's it.
missing
Yeah,
the point. You just don't just want to see fire.
very much. And the other thing is that we were still shooting film at that time, and the difficulty with shooting film is that you really have to register how bright it's going to get, because if it gets too bright, it just goes negative on the film and you can never recover it. Our cameras nowadays are much more they have a much broader window for being able to accept that kind of thing. But those days when you're doing film, you had to see that you had to be exposed for the day, but you also had to be exposed for the explosion. And sometimes when you get too big, I remember when we were out doing when O'Neill went into the face hugger.
Yes.
And we were blowing up the field out there. That was we were doing it in August, and it was high. I remember that we had fire engines and everything like that there, because it was very much a fire problem for us. But we were blowing them up, and as the gliders were coming in, they were blowing these things off. But we lost a lot of detail in them again because the explosions were too big and bright. And it's one of the reasons you use gas bags, that are like literally a plastic bag filled with gasoline, because gasoline burns yellow rather than that white explosion that you get sometimes when you use just straight dead cord.
I have a conversation with Bruce Woloshyn that I did when Rising was still on the cutting room floor. And I'm interested to know now, for my own education as well as just a little bit of detail for the audience. He said that with film, you can tune the film so that you can change some of the details of the explosion. But at that point, with digital, what you see is what you get. And a lot of the explosions in Atlantis were just yellow. Is that not the case anymore with like with the range
anymore.
of like
you
UHD
have a much more it's called dynamic range.
Okay.
And the camera is much more able to see that kind of stuff. He's right. With film, you had a huge dynamic range, but you also had to worry about exposure an awful lot more. Whereas right now, you can manipulate exposure very much more with because you have it digitally. And
in the editing bay.
We do it in the editing bay, but it's a lot of times it just goes into the resolve or the color, whatever we're using to do the DaVinci, whatever we're using to do the color correct. And sometimes they'll pull it back for us. It's the danger is going to a place where it's called peaking, where there's you have from here to here that you can actually expose it. If it goes over that, it literally folds over top like that and turns into mush. If you get higher than that peak, it turns to mush. So what you need something that's holding it inside that. And often what holds it inside that is stuff that will turn it to mush too. So you're trying to have a dynamic range that's big enough that will accept that.
Wow. I want to talk about taking digital elements.
I ever tell you, by the way, that Bruce Woloshyn was a student of mine.
Was
when
he?
I was teaching school?
I did not know that.
He came in without knowing anything about film and television. And I taught him for 2 years at the Institute of Technology in Edmonton. And he came out, I mean, he was always wanting to do film. I remember he did a music video, because he had this black Trans Am. And he wanted to do a video with that Trans Am, and he shot this video. And I remember still, it was to the music, it was to Photograph, by Nickelback, maybe.
I'm not familiar with it.
Anyway, that's what I remembered of Bruce. And then when Bruce started working with me on Atlantis, when we were doing the prep for Atlantis and the stuff like this, it was so funny because he had a position that I'd seen him come from, he was never little, but he was from being this neophyte to the whole thing.
You know talented people when you see them, and when they come into your life later on, it's like, I'm not surprised. Yeah, absolutely.
Very much, yeah.
Can we talk a minute about Replicators?
Yes. Yeah.
You started off with these things. I had Craig Vanden Begler and I had an amazing conversation about Replicators. And one of the scenes and I want to talk about a purely digital sequence later on, the first strike sequence that lasted over a minute. Yeah. But one of you started off with the Replicators in Nemesis, and then in Small Victories, you started.
Small Victories, it was in the tube, yeah.
Exactly right. Yeah. And we talked a little bit about the submarine, but I remember from the special features, you guys talking about the red dots that were secured on the top of this set piece. That in some cases you kept in because they looked cool, and tracking these elements. How does that all work?
So the Replicators were the first thing that James Tischner ever let me actually move the camera on as a 3D character. And that made such a huge difference because the Replicators we'd already seen them. We'd already seen what they were. And we came back into it. And he said, I think we can do it handheld. And that sequence running down the hallway where Replicators are up the walls and coming after us and things like this, and us running backwards, that was, there was a whole thing because we were always limited with things like the kawoosh and with stuff like that as for a lock off because it was that 3D effect. When you get into 3D, it is very difficult for them to track. It's very difficult for them,
Yeah.
and we had rudimentary tracking systems like what was called the Buju system and stuff, which would throw up all these tracking marks and then it would try and find it inside there rather than you putting tracking marks into it. Um, and with replicators, it was one of those things where there was enough dynamic motion inside them that it wasn't like when we did dinosaurs for Primeval. It was a whole different thing where it was like, as long as I've given you the space to be able to do it and sometimes give you interactive pieces for it, they'll figure out where the dinosaur is in that space. With this kind of 3D effect, like the Kawoosh or something like that, where it had to live inside, inside the ring, it had to do this kind of stuff. It was always lock off, lock off, lock off. And then we started moving into, okay, we can go handheld with this, or we can go into motion where I can actually follow something. So at the end of the torpedo tube, when the replicator comes out and jumps on it, that can be in motion. And it doesn't have to be, and I told you about my whole ordeal of being in the torpedo tube.
Right, exactly.
That scene from inside the torpedo tube.
Oh, I couldn't do it, man.
Yeah, I'll never forget that. It was one of those things where I remember Jim Menard, the DP, opening the hatch because he sealed me in, opening the hatch and, "You're not claustrophobic, are you?" And I said, "Not until now."
Yeah.
Because my feet were against the seawall, which meant like it's right against the water.
Yeah.
And I have a camera in front of me. And my shoulders like this, because I'm just too big to get inside this thing. And all this rust is dropping on me. And I'm sitting there waiting for them to open this thing. And I'm thinking, this is weird. There's like, it just goes blackout as soon as they close that.
What if I never come out?
Well, that was it.
You have to entertain that for a brief moment.
But having to push that camera forward and things like that was at the right moment was wild to get that perspective.
I don't think I've ever told you what my favorite sequence of yours is. My favorite single camera shot, and it has to do with replicators. And you alluded to it in the hallway. You're referring to enemies.
Yes.
They're aboard Apophysis' ship. It's been half eaten by these things. You've got Carmen on the radio trying to get a hold of Jack and Sam. And they come around the hallway. And these things are following them behind. You come back and we see what it looks like to go into the matter stream of the ring transporter. That whole sequence with the replicators coming down on the walls, that was so cool. I love this sequence.
I appreciate that.
What was it like? Finally, only really a year after you've started doing a lot of this, freeing your camera up with. You're shooting weapons in this hallway. Everyone's got their glasses on. These things are coming down off of the walls. How do you storyboard that sequence? And it's a lot of Rob Fournier there as well. Making sure that everyone's safe.
Sequence. It's for me with the actors. It was shoot anything, anywhere, and there will be replicators there. So you don't have to just shoot down the hall. You can spin up like this and shoot into the wall. There will be replicators there. And that is very freeing for them because if it's a single thing, like again, when we did dinosaurs, we had Chuck, our stand-in a gray suit, sometimes holding a big head, running at them. And that process hasn't changed, by the way, for anything. Like when you see some of these things, like I was watching the behind the scenes in Avatar, and they do the same thing. They have guys running with a head, and it's like that's what they use for motion capture too. It's just so that everybody's looking at the same spot. You don't have to when it's replicators, and that was one of the liberating things about replicators is they're everywhere. And so James would literally look where they're aiming and then blow that one away, put some there, bring them up. And what was one of the things I said about that was I wanted them to surge. And so what happens is that some of them would surge to one side, so it wasn't just randomly coming down the hallway, that they were coming like this and then they'd go up the sides and they'd come like this. And it was more scary.
And they're communicating with one another like
yes.
animals would,
Yeah.
They're like a flock of birds.
A hive mind,
It's
yeah.
a high. That's exactly right. How cool is that,
Yeah.
man? Oh
Yeah. I
man.
mean, whenever I think about this again, I think about how appreciative I was of the brains of, Brad Wright and Jonathan Glasner and Paul and Joe and Damien and these guys that would think like this and then give it over to us. And we'd go, okay, if this is the design of these things, then let's make them do this. Like even the ones that come back to life where they sort of transform themselves back into things. That just the minds that went into making this. I'm always fascinated by them. It's funny when you watch television, you don't think the same way you do when you're in the middle of it, because when you're in the middle of it, you get the process happening and you see like the Naquadah bomb behind you and things that
Mm-hmm.
I know where that came from. I saw the first design of it. I saw where it came. I know how it came into that being. I knew how I needed something that would be able to be activated because originally it was a switch and I went, no, it has to be something that lift and turn so it's much more visual. And that's where that sort of comes from. I kind of wish I'd been around when the Zat Nicotel had been invented, but that was not me. So I can't take a responsibility for
You
that.
got
But
to deal with it for the next 9 years.
exactly, yeah, yeah.
Jeez.
Don't push it 3 times because he disappears. I think he disappears.
Sometimes, and then like some stuff that's like with it will disappear if you need it to. So
Yeah,
yeah, and it can
yeah.
break locks. So
Weird. And did anybody ever figure out the timeline so that if I got shot with one yesterday and stunned, or 2 hours ago, and then you shoot me again now, am I going to die?
yeah, or
You know?
disintegrate. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it comes down to their own personal immune system or whatever. No, technically, no, it was not. It was kept free. Taking shots like this, going totally digital.
Hmm.
The longest you had the longest digital effect sequence in the
Okay.
franchise, which was First Strike, where we nuke
Oh,
Asurus, the replicators in the Pegasus Galaxy,
yeah.
where the Daedalus delivers a payload, and we follow it down almost to the surface of the planet, watching
Right.
these nukes detonate.
Yeah.
Uh, what a sequence. Was that something that was more freeing because you have more time to do this? Joel Goldsmith is going nuts with the music,
It
or
was
was
a
this something that
question
was
of
more complicated?
it was a question of whether we wanted to do interactive with it or not. And when we decided not to do interactive with it, when it was going to become a fully digital sequence. And this is when you start talking about digital sequences today, it sounds weird because we've seen movies that are made like this, like any Marvel movie that you watch. Most of the action sequences are almost all totally digital. At that time, we were still very much in a it has to have some kind of physical effect in it to be able to make it work for us. Of course, anything that's in space would be totally digital, but in order to make things work, and even glider flights on Earth and things like this, do we want, when it comes in, do we want to actually go and clip some trees? Do I want to get some footage of the trees themselves to make it feel like it's more practical? So you always ask, I mean, as soon as you sit down with VisFX to talk about it, you're talking about how much practical do you want in this to make it feel like we're grounding it in a place that the audience doesn't just go, oh, it's just totally digital. And we made some mistakes with total digital stuff too. I remember um, there was a fight uh, between it was between two motherships. I'm trying to think of what it was.
Was this at the end of season 9 with Camelot?
It's no, it was where Tilk and his son
Okay.
were and who else was with them? Was it
It's Braytac, probably.
Raytak was with them? Yeah, and they're watching the gliders come in.
Yeah, yeah. So
It
this
was
is
yeah,
Redemption 2.
Redemption 2, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a space fight before that though.
Okay.
There was and I remember looking at it going, that one doesn't hold up very well. And often for me, it was a personal thing where if you have ships that are that big, turning and moving quickly, it just felt like, okay, that's the physics is gone because you can't move those things quickly, even depending on what propulsion system you've got on, it still takes a run up to it, and it would
Yep.
never work like that. And so we had discussions about that kind of stuff, and it was always like, yeah, but it's a TV show. And it's like, I mean, nobody ever said that out loud, but it was always like, we only have this much time to be able to do it. So moving the motherships around, I always liked it better when they were just these behemoths that were, these dreadnoughts that were moving. And I think that they got much better at that as they went. And so did my planning of sort of the storyboarding of what it was going to look like. Is I'd have an idea about how it went together. Brad would then enhance that with what he wanted to do with it. But it was very often a storyboarded sequence in space that would take us down to the surface of
Mm-hmm.
the planet. And then for me, it would be, okay, now I have to involve some physical effects so that when the glider comes in to take out, what it's taking out, can I blow stuff up for real to make it feel like now we've got that interactivity with us?
And
You know?
now with some of the visual effects that are coming along, like with Unreal 5, you can't tell. I just went and saw.
Yeah.
I just saw Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, and the opening sequences of Indy back in
Yeah.
the 40s. And the most unrealistic thing about it was his voice. He sounds
And
too
yeah,
old. But the
yes,
visuals, I'm looking at it and I'm like, this is so much further from Peter Cushing in Rogue One just a few years ago. I
yes, yeah,
can't. I don't. I can tell a little bit, like with the eyes and with some of
yeah.
the lighting, but otherwise, gosh, we're so close now.
Yes, and it's I mean it's a fascinating cusp that we're on, and I always feel this way about progress like this. It doesn't frighten me at all. Having AI involved in what we do doesn't frighten me because we've been doing that. We've been asking for it to be able to do, to be able to duplicate 1,000 replicators, you know, with AI would be a much faster, much cleaner process than what we did. Um, it's what it allows us to do, and what AI is going to allow us to do, and what the digital effects are allowing us to do is expand our brains.
Yeah.
You know,
What's possible?
this is what we thought was possible
Yeah.
before, but now what we think is possible is this. And I actually ran into this yesterday, or Friday, on a location scout. I was in a set that had been built on Sullivan's Crossing, a practical set built from an existing set that exists in the world that is too difficult to get to. So we rebuilt it in a studio. And the production designer, I said something about if we wanted to do this, we could do this. And he goes, yeah, that's so expensive that I think you should probably do it VisFX. And I said, great. And somebody else said something about well, they do it when they do the animation for these things. They do it when like an animated show would do this and this and this. And and I started thinking, we're getting closer to what animation can do. We're getting to the point where with animators, and I remember watching it wasn't Studio Ghibli, but it was another one that came out a few years ago. Anime thing that came out that was called Your Name, or um, I think it was Your Name. What's your name?
Mm-hmm.
Or what's my name? I can't remember what it's called. I'm stupid with those kind of things.
That's okay.
But I remember looking at it as a director and going, "Oh, this is so beautiful. They're able to do this and this and this and this and this." I thought, you know what? Nowadays, I can do that without having to, like, it's these massive shots that start up here and end down here in an eye, or it's this kind of stuff. I can do that. And a couple of years ago, I couldn't, but now, I mean, there's stuff right now, David, that I take my 249-gram drone and I walk up to the DP and say, "Hey, can I do this?" And he goes, "Sure." And I throw it up in the air and I get a shot that does that starts up there and it comes down and poof, lands on somebody's face. And I'm sitting there going, I didn't have to animate that at all. I can actually put this thing a kilometer up and drop it down at full speed, and it comes into this shot. And that used to be a huge amount of animation. Now I can do it practically with a drone.
And it's real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Gosh sakes.
I'm a huge fan of the advance of technology. I love it in what we do. And the
Yeah.
older I get as a director, I'm more and more appreciative of it. Then I told you, I think last time we were talking about the number of times I've used a light wall in the last 4 or 5 movies I've done. That the light walls for me are these things that are just the greatest invention for filmmakers. Every driving sequence I've done, everything I've done, snowstorms, this kind of stuff, I do on light walls.
Yeah, it interacts with the stuff that's in front of it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's just
Every
amazing.
reflective piece shows us everything.
Martin, do you have a few more minutes for questions?
I do.
Okay. Brian King wants to know, who do you keep in contact with from Stargate the most?
Well, Amanda and I live a block away from each other. We see each other all the time. We walk the dogs together. We see each other all the time. We are always comparing notes about where she is. She's in Ontario right now doing a new series that she's producing and directing. I'm here, but I know just before she left, it was like, I'll see you in December. And I'm like, okay, I'll be here. And then I'm like over top of her and saying, hey, I'm gonna be, closer. I see Michael and Lexa all the time because our
Ah,
kids were great friends. Um, I've talked to Rick a couple of times, not as much as I want to, just to say hi. Um, Brad and I have passed in the night a couple of times, talking to each other. I see a lot of the actors that we had. I just finished something with Steve Basic. I do, all the actors that we use, and somebody will come in and go, "Oh, you remember me? I was Jaffa. You killed 9 times," and I'm like, "Oh, great, okay." So there's a lot of that, but of the principals, it's I haven't talked to Chris for a long time. I think did I tell you the story about hearing his voice on set once?
no.
And I came on the set and suddenly I hear Marta Wood, and I turned and I went, Chris, and it was Christopher, his son,
Ah,
and he sounded
wow. Just like
exactly like
him.
his dad. Exactly.
Ah,
He's huge, and he comes over and gives me a big hug and says, "My dad said to give you a hug."
ah. Yeah, the
So
one who appeared in The Changeling. I've met him. He's a good guy.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Sandra
yeah.
Rankin, when you bring actors in that you've directed before, do you find it easier to communicate with them, or is it just like anyone else, or is there a benefit from an established relationship from the past?
It's interesting that you asked that question right now. This morning, one of the actors on the series I'm doing right now is Scott Patterson, who I worked with on the very first thing I directed. And I started directing it because it was a TV movie called Them,
Okay.
and it was written by Kim Lemasters. And uh, I replaced the director at the very end. I was the first assistant director on the show. I replaced the director for the very beginning and end sequences of the movie with Scott as an actor. And Scott and I were reminiscing about that. And what's interesting to me, and the reason I say that it's interesting that it happens right now, is because that makes it much easier for me to direct him here because we have something. He knows me already. It was 30 years ago, but he did remember me and he said, "Oh, I remember this about you." And often with actors that I've directed before, because there's a rapport already and because
Hmm.
they already know that they can trust you, I'm hoping, um, it makes it much easier to direct them. Whereas with new actors that have never worked with you before, especially if they haven't researched who you are, there's a reticence to trust you right off the bat, and trusting a director and trusting an actor are the two biggest things that have to happen on a set.
So there's a proving period that always has to occur. It's
Almost
not like,
always.
well, this person has been hired, so I'm just going to, trust fall.
Yeah, no, that trust fall will happen often after a scene or two, of just being able to give them good direction or being able to find out what they can show you. Like I've spent 20 hours watching all these episodes, but I don't know some of the actors. I don't know what direction they were given to get them to certain places. So it's interesting for me to hear them and talk to them too.
A,
So both ways.
a technical question. La France et Far says, I butchered that. I apologize, sir, or ma'am. How hard is it to shoot scenes with a lot of water, like in Grace Under Pressure? Do you shy away from that, or
My
is...
favorite thing to do. I love it.
Yeah?
I put
Really?
water in everything. Ask Amanda Tapping. She hated it because I used to put it in everything. Like all sanctuaries that I could. Is like, we're gonna be in a water tank. You're gonna be like this. And then, next Tuesday was one of
Hmm.
them that it was like there's these huge things that we do with water. And I love working in water. It's just one of my favorite things. I think I told you at one point about having Richard Dean Anderson just surprised the hell out of me. I sank with a camera. He has to swim from the ladder over to release the things to be able to drain the water. And he has to do it. And my thinking was, okay, Rick, we're going to do this in three parts. Go as far as you can. I'll follow you. Then we'll just turn around. I'll do this. And he came underwater, and I was down with Ricardo, or not with Ricardo, with our underwater camera operator, and he came down, he swam across. We followed him over with it. Both of us were underwater as well, because that's one of the things I always do is I'll always be under with them. Um, Came across. He manipulated the controls, acted like you see it on his
Because it's
face.
not working.
He's acting. He's trying to get it to go, and finally it happens. Swims back and swims up, and I'm like, he held his breath for a minute and a half. So I just love what water does. And with David and Amanda in Grace Under Pressure, it was so much fun. It's a great medium to work in.
Yeah, absolutely. So before I let you go, what's next? You're gonna be staying out east for a while. Do you have further plans
I'm out here
beyond
for a
this?
couple of months to
Okay.
do this, and then I go back. I have a murder mystery series that is just coming up right now that I've done two of. I'm going to do two more this coming year. I have this thriller that I wrote
Okay.
with Kevin Smith and Pascal
Oh,
Hutton and Peter Benson and Julia Benson. We wrote this thing that is this really fun thriller that's just four actors, and I'm really hoping that comes up. I've been asked about a motorcycle movie, a fairly substantial feature that would be fun to do.
they're in vogue now.
Yeah, yeah.
So
It sounds like a really good one. I read the script and I really liked it, so I said yes, absolutely. If it's going to happen, let me happen with it. So, yeah,
I I'm always excited with what you're doing next, sir, and I appreciate the time that you give in coming on and sharing some of these older stories. When I
I
have you back
appreciate
next
David.
year, I will make sure to give you a more detailed list so that you won't be like, uh,
You know
my
what? I
apologies.
appreciate it, and what I appreciate about it is I appreciate two things. One is I appreciate you reminding me about these things, because for me it was an incredibly happy time. I mean, my career has been a happy time for me. I really enjoy doing what I do, and have always loved it, and had such a beautiful education, starting with Solitudes, and just being thrust into the Solitudes in politics that first year, and going, I love this. I'm never going back. I am only going to do this. And then being given the opportunity to do as many of them as I did, and then and then Atlantis, and then Sanctuary, and then Primeval, and all, like, series after series of all these things, and Olympus, all of these things, just to get, I so appreciate you reminding me and reminding everybody, because Stargate was such a fantastic series to work on for everybody.
That's the
Um,
major question that I get asked from layman's is like, it went on for 17 seasons. How did it do that? Because they were happy, because they
mhm.
enjoyed what they were doing, because they had a great team.
Yeah. Amanda and I talk about it all the time, about how much fun that was, and then following it with Sanctuary was a perfect cherry on top for us, you know.
That's good stuff. I can't wait to have you back next year, Martin. Please be well. And I'm going to wrap up the show on this end here, but you take care of yourself, and you have a good fall and holiday season. All right, sir.
Absolutely, David. Thank you for calling.
Be well.
Yeah.
Bye bye.
Bye-bye.
Martin Wood, everyone, producer and director for Stargate SG-1 at Atlantis. This guy, his body of work, it continues to be so extensive, and I'm thrilled that he's continuing to have the success that he's having. Before we let you go, if you enjoy Stargate and you want to see more content like this on YouTube, please click subscribe. It will notify you when we have more content coming your way. We've got a few more episodes left this season. If you like this episode, give us a thumbs up. Giving the bell icon a click will notify you the moment a new video drops, and you'll get my notifications of any last-minute guest changes. And clips from this live stream will be released over the course of the next few weeks in both Dial the Gate and the GateWorld.net YouTube channels. I had one question for me. Are we getting Jill Wagner anytime soon? I have requested her before. I will make another request again. We've got new episodes coming up next week. I'll be building the list on dialthegate.com, so stay tuned. And Wormhole Extremists is coming up later on today. We're doing more of season 5. My name is David Reed for Dial the Gates. I appreciate my moderating team for keeping me on track today. I had Anthony and Jeremy. You guys are awesome. I'll see you on the other side.